Good morning, everybody. How we doing today? It's Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Where are you? Hopefully you're downloading Uncle Jimmy's podcast. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook and on YouTube at Uncle Jimmy's Podcast. And we're streaming everywhere. Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Wherever you can stream it, we're there. And then I'd like to take a second to talk about the sponsor of the show, at Ferg's Custom Cards. You can follow him on Facebook and on Instagram. If you can think of an idea, Ferg can make you a card. But due to Trump's tariffs, he cannot ship to the States right now. But he's hanging on and he's doing as best as he can making the cards. Still, go follow him. See if you like them. Maybe order a couple once the tariffs are lifted. Then you'll be able to get one. But for those up in Canada, he does an awesome job. Go check him out. Look it up. At Ferg's Custom Cards. If you can think of it, he can make it. So today, as you know, in October, it was all of these are supposed to be a Halloween special. But I got something that has been bothering me. So we're going to talk about the subject first. And not that the subject bothers me. I'm actually pretty excited for everybody that's going to go out and protest. So today is No Kings protest, America's Day of Defiance. There comes a moment in democracy when silence is no longer an option, when quiet dissent becomes loud, when people who feel powerless decide to act. Today, across America, millions are expected to rise, to stand in streets, in squares, outside courthouses, to carry signs, voices, and hope, to say, No Kings. This is Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Tonight's episode, No Kings, America's Day of Defiance. In June 2025, what started as a grassroots idea became a movement. The No Kings protest was born, out of growing alarm over perceived authoritarian overreach by the Trump administration. Executive decrees, deployment of federal forces in cities, aggressive rhetoric, in a sense among many that democratic norms were under siege. On June 14th, protests erupted in over 2,000 locations across the United States. Organizers estimated participation of more than 5 million people nationwide. That day, dubbed No King's Day, aligned with two symbolic events: President Trump's 79th birthday and a military parade celebrating the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary. The phrase, No Kings itself, is a declaration, a rejection of unchecked power, of kingships in our republic, of leadership without accountability. The movement is coordinated by groups like 5051, along with Indivisible, labor unions, civil rights groups, and grassroots coalitions. The next major protest is scheduled for today. 2,500 locations across the United States, including Washington, D.C.'s National Mall. But the protests happening today, it's more than a one-day event. It's part of a movement testing whether mass mobilization can hold power accountable. So let's get in. Let's hear what the Republican leader and the Democratic leader are saying about today's events.
Now, tomorrow, the Democrat leaders are going to join for a big party out on the National Mall. They're going to descend on our Capitol for their much-anticipated so-called No Kings rally. We refer to it by its more accurate description, the Hate America rally, okay? And I'm not sure how anybody can refute that.
I support the right of every single American to participate in the rallies that are going to take place this week. And showing up to express dissent against an out-of-control administration, that's as American as motherhood, baseball, and apple pie. That's the First Amendment. What's hateful is what happened on January 6th. That was a Hate America rally sponsored by Donald Trump and his sycophants who incited a violent mob to storm the Capitol. That's what hate looks like. What you'll see this weekend is what patriotism looks like.
There you have it, Speaker Johnson, who's saying that it's a Hate America rally, which is out of control. And then Hakeem Jeffries saying it's going to be peaceful, it's a protest on Trump and what's going on in this country. But can you believe, Speaker Johnson, that it's the Hate America rally? Anytime you speak out against Donald Trump or this administration, it's hate, it's hate, it's hate, it's hate. As an American, we have a right to free speech, to protest peacefully, and that's what we're going to do today. What the protest means and what it doesn't. To critics, No Kings has been cast as a partisan effort, left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. Some Republican leaders have already condemned it, calling it un-American or labeling participants as radicals. But look deeper. Organizers insist this isn't about party lines, it's about principles. The balance of power, constitutional checks, civil liberties, and freedom of dissent. They emphasize nonviolence, crowd safety, de-escalation, and lawful protest. They call on participants to bring signs, voices, solidarity, not weapons. They argue that protest is not disruption, but democracy in action. In announcing the protests, organizers invoke history. America has no kings, and the power belongs to the people. The protest is meant to be both symbolic and concrete, rejecting overreach, defending rights, demanding accountability, reminding leaders that consent must be earned. What to expect today? Organizers expect protests in 2,500 locations across the U.S. and beyond, from rural towns to big cities. Flagship events are planned for Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, Houston, Boston, but even small towns will play a key part. Key issues include concerns about expansion of executive authority, federal deployment in local law enforcement, erosion of civil rights and press freedoms, and cuts to social programs. Protesters may carry signs referencing monarchy, crowns, thrones, imagery meant to contrast with democratic value ideals. Expect chants, speeches, songs, banners, and public declarations. Safety measures, no weapons, emphasis on peaceful behavior. Organizers providing training, some cities with increased law enforcement presence. Potential flashpoints, police, crowd control, counter-protesters, traffic disruptions, and media framing. The protest is about more than one policy or one election. It's about the meaning of democracy in 2025. For many participants, this is a test. Can grassroots voice still matter? Can mass protests push back on centralization? Can citizens remind power that is temporary, accountable, and collective? For critics, tomorrow is a danger, potential unrest, disruptions, division. But for those showing up, this is a statement: I will not bow. A reminder that authority cannot be unchecked. Voices shaping No Kings. Ezra Levin. He frames No Kings not as a spectacle, but a continuation of civic duty. Civil rights groups and labor unions supporting the mobilization, offering infrastructure, legal support, and safety teams. Local chapters coordinating routes, distributing resources. Opponents and political leaders. House Speaker Mike Johnson, often criticizing protests as Hate America rallies. Texas Governor Greg Abbott deploying national troops in anticipation of unrest. These voices shape both the protest and how the public remembers it. We're going to hear from one of the organizers on what he is saying about today's protests.
We're going to see probably the largest day of protest in American history tomorrow, as millions of Americans turn out for peaceful but vigorous protest against Donald Trump's authoritarianism. I think what these protests are about is demonstrating against authoritarianism for democracy by exercising our democratic rights. We had a first round of No Kings. We had 5 million people on the street, overwhelmingly peaceful. There is a problem with violence and aggression in this country, and it's coming from the president. It's coming from his deployment illegitimately of National Guard troops around the country. It's coming from his authorization of masked men to abduct people and send them away, including because of their political views. So we're with you. We have to deal with the problem of political violence. But this movement, this effort to stop this slide to authoritarianism, it is grounded in, driven by nonviolence. And we're going to see a massive day tomorrow of joyful protest, exercise of our First Amendment rights, and a direct challenge to all the things that Donald Trump is trying to do.
What you can do if you can't make it today. You don't have to be in the streets to make your presence felt. Amplify local events, share times, locations, and resources. Support organizers with donations, legal funds, supplies. Tell your story. Share why you support democracy, respect dissent, stay informed, know your rights, follow independent media, and show solidarity. Even symbolic acts strengthen the movement. Today is just not a protest. It's a declaration of belief that power belongs to the people, not to those who cling to it. History remembers days when citizens rose, but history also remembers whether those days led to change or were forgotten as noise. No kings is a wager that when enough people stand, the foundations shake. That democratic energy, when collective, can reclaim space. Whether you're marching or standing in quiet solidarity, this is not theater. This is democracy asserting itself. So for everybody out there today, stay safe, stay peaceful, stay alert, and after, tell your story, because everybody wants to hear it. We're going to take a break, and we're going to get into Halloween special, The Lady in Black. Welcome back to Uncle Jimmy's podcast. We're going to get into the Halloween story. They say the past never truly dies, especially on an island surrounded by cold Atlantic water and history soaked in blood. Just beyond the Boston skyline, on a quiet stretch of the harbor, sits Fort Warren, an old granite fortress built before the Civil War. It looks peaceful now, with grassy slopes and crumbling tunnels. Families picnic there in the summer. Ferries bring curious tourists to explore the ramparts. But when the fog rolls in and the sea goes still, locals say you can feel something else. A chill in the stone, a whisper in the wind, a presence, dressed in black, that still walks the walls. This is the story of Boston's Lady in Black, one of New England's most haunting and enduring urban legends. Fort Warren was built in the early 1800s to defend Boston Harbor from invasion during the Civil War. It served as a prison for Confederate soldiers, officers, spies, even politicians accused of aiding the South. The fort was cold and isolated, sitting on George's Island, miles from the mainland. Prisoners called it the Rock in the Harbor. Some said they could hear the city faintly across the water at night. Church bells, laughter, life continuing without them. But inside those granite walls, time stood still. Men counted the days, the tides, the number of rats in their cells. And somewhere in that silence, the legend begins. According to the story, a young southern woman named Melanie Lanier received word that her husband, Andrew, had been captured and sent to Fort Warren. She couldn't bear the thought of him dying in a northern prison, so she made a decision few would dare. She cut her hair, disguised herself in men's clothing, and set out on a desperate journey north. She carried only a small pistol, a pickaxe, and a heart full of love and fear. Sometime in the early 1860s, she arrived in Boston Harbor and found a small boat. Under the cover of night, she rowed through the freezing water toward the dark silhouette of the fort. The sound of the oars disappeared into the fog. Her plan was simple: find her husband, break him out, and escape before dawn. But Fort Warren was not an easy place to fool. In the deepest part of the night, Melanie reached the fort's seawall. She used her pickaxe to climb the rough stone and slip through an opening that led into a dim corridor. Some versions of the story say she found her husband. Others say she was caught before she reached him. But the most retold version, the one passed from tour guides to school children, says that she did find him, and that in their panic to escape, tragedy struck. As guards discovered the couple, Melanie tried to defend them. She raised her pistol, the same pistol she'd carried all the way from Georgia, but the weapon misfired. The shot ricocheted, and the bullet struck her husband instead. He died instantly, and the echoes of that gunshot are said to still ring through the fort's tunnels. After the failed escape, Melanie was captured. The Union officers were shocked to discover the intruder was a woman. She was accused of espionage and sentenced to death by hanging. Before her execution, she made one final request, that she be allowed to die wearing woman's clothing. But Fort Warren was a man's world. There wasn't a single dress or gown within those walls, so the soldiers improvised. They found black cloth, some say a blanket, others a mourning robe, and fashioned a crude dress. Melanie was hanged in the garment, the black cloth billowing in the harbor wind. She was buried on the island in those same black robes, and that's how she became known forever as the Lady in Black. Not long after the execution, soldiers began to report strange happenings. Footsteps echoing through empty corridors, a woman's voice softly crying, doors slamming when no wind was blowing. A guard claimed to see a figure drifting through the dungeon passageways. A woman in flowing black, her face pale, her eyes empty. When he followed her, she vanished into a solid wall. Decades later, during World War I, soldiers stationed nearby said they saw her walking along the ramparts at dawn. And even in modern time, visitors to George's Island tell of cold spots, whispers, and sudden dread in the dark corners of Fort Warren. Some say she's still looking for her husband. Others believe she's protecting him. A spirit bound by guilt and love. Either way, she never left. So who was Melanie Lanier? Really? Was she ever a real person? Historians have searched records of Civil War prisoners and found no official documentation of her trial or execution. That doesn't mean she doesn't exist. It just means the story may have been born from the imagination of one man. Edward Rowe Snow. Edward Rowe Snow, what a name. A Boston historian and storyteller who spent decades collecting maritime legends. Snow first published the tale of the Lady in Black in the 1940s, claiming he'd heard it from an old sea captain. He told it so vividly that it soon became part of Boston's identity, retold on ghost tours, in classrooms, and around campfires. Over time, the line between history and folklore blurred, as it often does. Why does this story endure? Because at its heart, it's a love story and a tragedy. A woman braves war, distance, and danger for the man she loves. She fails, but her devotion outlives her body. It's Romeo and Juliet by the sea, with ghosts instead of graves. And the image of the black robe gives the story the lasting power. It's mourning made visible. Love turning into eternal grief. Every time someone sees her shadow on the ramparts, they're reminded of what it means to hold on too long. In that way, the Lady in Black isn't just a ghost. She's a symbol of all the sorrow that history leaves behind. If you visit George's Island today, you can still walk the tunnels of Fort Warren. The walls are cold. The air smells of salt and time. You can stand in the dungeons where prisoners once whispered their final prayers. Some visitors swear they've seen her. A flicker of movement in the dark. A black shape drifting near the old powder magazine. A sense that someone or something is watching. Others hear nothing but the waves, the seagulls, the distant hum of ferries returning to Boston. Maybe she's gone. Maybe she was never there. But if you listen closely, you might just catch the faint sound of a woman weeping in the fog, a ghostly echo of love and regret that refuses to fade. Legends like this remind us that history isn't just dates and battles, it's emotion, memory, and the need to keep stories alive. The Lady in Black walks the line between truth and myth, between what we know and what we feel. Every city has a ghost that defines it. For Boston, it's her, a lone figure in black, haunting the harbor, watching over the past. And whether she's real or not doesn't matter as much as why we still tell her story, because in every retelling, she reminds us the power of love and the ghosts we all carry, the ones that never quite let go. This has been Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Thank you for joining me for tonight's story, The Lady in Black, Boston's Ghost of Fort Warren. If you ever find yourself out on George's Island and you feel a cold hand on your shoulder, don't be afraid. Just whisper a prayer for Melanie Lanier. And remember that some stories are meant to be eternal. Burn the ships. Peace and love. Peace and love. Uncle Jimmy out.